This is Mission Qualfon, a monthly podcast that takes you inside the workings of our company, but not just the ins and outs of business. We look at the ideas and insights that make Qualfon truly unique. As a company, we are committed to being the best and making each person's life better. Join us as we get to know and learn from people from across the organization. What's their story? What have they learned? And how do they live out Qualfon's mission? Welcome to Mission Qualfon. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to the Mission Qualfon podcast. I'm Jeremy Lennon, and I'm here with my partner, Marisol Sanchez. Hi, Marisol. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and very much looking forward to our interview today.
Yes, we have Michael Osorio, our Director of Business Intelligence and Reporting.
We always use the term inside baseball. Actually, we're not talking about baseball. We're talking about BPO, but the same thing, right? And so with this episode with Mike today, we kind of get into a little more of the nitty gritty of the BPO. And I just really enjoyed the conversation we had.
I did too. And I enjoyed last week's conversation.
You know, Marisol, I have gotten so much feedback about the last episode. We had Eric Rothard, who's a VP of call center operations. He's based in Dallas, and he's been in the industry for almost 30 years and has been a part of several acquisitions. And the thing that really resonated with folks is he talked about two things, really. He talked about the feeling of family here at Qualfon, and he said that for the first time, he felt like he had a home here with Qualfon. Yeah, I mean, that's big coming from someone who's been through so many acquisitions, and he said he finally felt like he had a home. And that's something that just made a lot of people feel good, and I've heard a lot about that. It was great.
It gave me the warm and fuzzies. And Qualfon does that a lot. It really does. We received an email recently from our wonderful, wonderful, hardworking benefits team. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that because we're currently in the benefits cycle. Yes. And at least here in the States, I'm not sure if that's a global thing. But they sent this email, I think it was like last week, and it was talking about, hey, let's face it, we're stressed out. We've got COVID going on. We have things going on here. Yep. Anxiety, stress, there's a lot of that going around. And they sent this email about mental well-being resources. And I wasn't aware of it, and I was excited for it. All employees are eligible, including new hires, for Qualfon, for Dialogue Direct, for MARS. And it's a service, it's an employee assistance program to help support us with any physical, financial, or mental well-being issues that we're experiencing right now in life. And, you know, I know for myself, I was about to schedule, a meeting with my financial planner because some things have changed in my life with my kids and colleges. And I didn't realize that I had this service, that instead of paying someone out of pocket to give me some advice and counsel me, Qualfon's coming in and helping me out. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And it's something that's available to employees of Qualfon. And so please, if you need it, contact your people or mission person and make sure you use all the resources that we have available to you.
And that's a great reminder. And it's funny you mentioned this because just yesterday I was completing my open enrollment. And every year when I do it, I'm shocked at how many things there are, right? And obviously a lot of these things are the employee pays part of it also. So it's held out of our paychecks. But there are a number of things that aren't, that are just benefits provided to us as employees. And then many of these things that are offered are like really, really inexpensive, like $2 or $3 a month. I mean, something crazy. And I'm just always surprised at how many resources are available and how many ways Qualfon tries to help its employees. I think that's great.
I have a funny benefit story. Can I tell you this funny? Because it kind of ties into the mission, the Qualfon mission. So I was doing my benefits as well, and I get to the 401k part, and it had a list of accounts that I have, and there was an email there for a former employer So apparently this is why I need a financial planner in my life. Apparently I forgot about a 401k I had somewhere. And I obviously I recognized the email in that company, but Jeremy, I could not remember where in my career this company fell in. They're all sort of a blur of acronyms. And I had to actually ask Mike, our CEO, because he was at this company as well. And I was like, is it this geography? Was it this logo that I would like? I was trying to piece it together.
Putting together your past. Yes.
Yeah, but piece together my past. But what I was thinking about as I was doing this is not only had I not remembered that time in my career or this particular company, but if you twisted my arm and said, name the mission of this company, obviously my arm would be twisted because I do not know a mission statement from any company I've worked on. But Qualfon, whenever my career ends with Qualfon, I will always remember my time at Qualfon, and I will always certainly remember our mission statement.
That's great. And with that, let's have our interview with Michael Osorio.
Well, I'm excited to have our next guest on because I think he was the first person after I was hired this time around that I connected with. And I connected very quickly because we both are from the same place. So welcome, Michael Osorio, to the Mission Qualfon podcast. How are you?
Good. And thank you for having me, Marisol and Jeremy. I appreciate being here.
So I'm from Hialeah, you're from?
I'm from Westchester, so a little south of Miami. And we have all the same great foods.
And the Latin background.
The Latin background. I think we connected. Yeah, we connected. I think you and I connected just speaking about the food to start with, especially the coffee.
Yeah.
The Cuban coffee. I definitely miss that.
I miss a Cuban sandwich. Medianoche.
I actually have a place here in Orlando that actually has a pretty good one, so I go there about once a week.
So there you go. That's just how we connected, Jeremy.
All right. Good.
But we also have a similar background or spot in our resume. We both worked, not at the same time, at different times for a particular company in Florida. That was Fort Lauderdale, right?
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale.
Plantation.
Is it still around?
It is. They still have the plantation office, I believe.
Same name? It wasn't acquired?
Well, I know it went through the acquisition a couple years, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, I'm not sure.
We're not going to name it, but that little tidbit that Michael and I just did back and forth, anyone who's worked in BPO could relate to that conversation because it's very common. Like, oh, did you work at this company? And you sort of get a feel for what the BPO experience could be like if you have a career in it, because it's like a huge industry, but it's also can feel at times very small. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, I think it's for the successful players in the BPO space. It's a small world, right? We end up meeting a lot of people like you and I, Marisol. We worked at the same place for different periods of time, know a lot of the same people. And if you think about it, I think that's a shared thing, we all have every day. I was talking to the new director of ops in Guyana, Mindy Dunn. Mm-hmm. And it was funny. She worked at the same company where I started my BPO career 20 years ago. So, and the same thing, we worked around, different times, but it was a cool way to connect with somebody that I've never spoken to.
But this is a perfect segue for you to tell us about how you ended up here at Qualfon, and then we're going to get into some fun questions for you.
So I've actually been in BPO, off and on since 1998. So I started in a small BPO based out of South Florida, the Fort Lauderdale area. Not the same one, Marisol. And there, I started out as an agent, at this point 22 years ago, and then went from an agent to a soup, and from a soup to QA, and from a QA to process engineering, ISO 9000 documentation. And then at one point, I think maybe 3 years after I started my career, I got into the world of IT. So I stayed with them for about 7 years and then kind of went to a different BPO, I've kind of bounced around in the BPO segment for, I think I've been either directly employed or consulted with maybe 5 or 6 of the big players throughout the 22 years. And about 9 years ago, I left the BPO industry for about 5 years. My son was born, 9 years ago, my son was born with a very rare kind of disease that basically makes him allergic to a lot of different foods and different things. And it was an interesting thing for me where in the BPO space, one of the really cool things is we get to touch on so many different verticals that it becomes really easy to kind of know what kind of questions to ask based upon the type of vertical, whether they're a technology company, a financial services, or, automotive. But healthcare was one that I felt that, when I went to my son's doctor's appointments, I didn't know what to ask. So I left, got into pediatric healthcare for about 5 years, doing a lot of the same things I do here in Qualfon. And then about 4 years ago, Prashant talked to me about an opportunity here at Qualfon. We talked about their mission. We talked about what kind of makes them different from kind of some of the other BPO players. At that point, I've spent 5 years in healthcare. I said, why not come back to what I know and I kind of love, being in the BPO space.
Mike, that's real interesting. And I don't know if you know, I have a son with special needs, and I kind of can relate to what you're saying. All of a sudden, when you're thrust into something that is new to you, in your case, asking the right questions of healthcare providers. And I was in that exact same boat. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I think for me, it was, like I said, a lot of the same things, right? And I think anybody who has children or family members or spouses or, extended family with special needs, we all have that fear of the unknown, right? We don't know what to ask. And we're all trying to kind of just determine what works best for our individual situation. So I remember I was working for a BPO, and I happened to get a call one day from a recruiter who asked if I was interested. And at the time, I had really no interest in changing careers. But again, as I was going kind of through this progression with my son and kind of going to the various doctor's appointments, like I said, I found myself not knowing what to ask. I found myself not knowing, how do they measure success? And really what I do for a living and here at Qualfon, as far as, if you look at reporting and BI, it's really all around what we're measuring and what our measurement of success is. And I didn't really know what that meant for a doctor or a nurse. So, I got an opportunity to kind of do analytics and things like that and infrastructure for a large pediatric hospital here in the US. And then it kind of taught me a little bit more about what they go through, how they measure success, and then it also kind of taught me about how to personally interact with some of these doctors, right? Because a lot of times we go into it very patient-centric, but at the same time, not necessarily knowing how individual doctors find that path of communication that works. So that kind of, like I said, it helped me for about, 5 or 6 years, kind of just doing that. And then, I kind of learned what I feel is, I think healthcare is ever evolving. But I felt that for me personally, it helped know what to ask, how to ask, and then kind of also understand what do they classify as measure of success. And then also, when I talk to doctors now, I can kind of get a sense of, are they more curious or are they more kind of focused on kind of what I call volume-based patient care, which is kind of the same concept of churn and burn on the patient cycles, versus how do I talk to somebody who's really focused on patient outcomes.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned the phrase churn and burn, which I'm going to come back to. But I had a question. I've kind of talked about this off, just in general conversations, but what does it feel like when you leave the BPO industry? Because when you leave the BPO industry to a different industry and then come back, because I've done that, and you and I have talked about, it's such a different world. It seems very comforting and familiar to come back to the BPO space many times because it's sort of like what you grew up kind of doing.
I think about this a lot, I know, Marissa, you and I've talked about this, where I was fortunate enough to be in healthcare for a couple of years. And healthcare is kind of very complex, but it's also very dull. It's very much of, well, we're going to start this project today to make these changes to whatever EMR. And you're talking about there's hundreds of people involved and it takes 3 years. It's almost like construction on I-95. They start a project and it probably takes 20 years to finish.
It's slow. I would reframe it from dull, though, because I don't want to insult our healthcare vertical.
True.
But it's a slow. I'm not even talking healthcare. I'm talking I feel in any verticals I've been on that is not in BPO. It's like they're in a different time warp than I'm used to. I'm used to speed and fast.
No, and the reason I say kind of dull is because that's what I kind of appreciate about this industry. It's like there's not a single day that I ever come to work and say, I am bored with what I'm doing. If you think about the sheer number of customers that we have and the number of customers that we support. And every single one of those have their own complexities, their own nuances, their own processes, their own measurements of success. And it's so different. I could talk to somebody in Guyana about what their needs are and somebody in the Philippines and what their needs are. And even though we're in the same vertical and, being in the BPO sector, their needs are incredibly different. In that context, there's never an opportunity, I think, within this industry to say, oh, well, I'm bored with what I'm doing. Because every 15 minutes, you're going to be dealing with something that's completely different, whether it's talent acquisition, whether it's looking at AHT for a specific client, whether it's looking at service levels for another. Again, I think every part of our day is so incredibly different that it's impossible to get bored of this industry.
And I think one of the things that's great about our industry too is if you spend and it doesn't have to be a lot of years, but after a number of years in our industry, you're exposed to all different kinds of accounts. I mean, like you said, you worked with healthcare, automotive, it could be telecommunications or whatever. Just the sheer exposure we get to different fields is pretty cool about working in BPO.
And I think a lot of people, especially kind of starting out their careers, look at a call center as, I can't make a career out of this. I need this for X number of months to either kind of get me through school, help pay for my, whatever bills I have or childcare or whatnot, while I find something else, while they each kind of individually find their vocation. And, we are an industry of, what would be classified as typically kind of like a high turnover industry, and similar to, some of the retail industries and some things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, it has been interesting coming in, starting out as an agent 20 odd something years ago. And, for me to kind of go from an agent to project manager in IT took me 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of industries that really afford that opportunities either. So it's really around, people retention. How do we retain people? And kind of giving this misconception of kind of an industry-wide misconception of, well, this is kind of my starting out job. I don't intend to be here very long while I work through X career path. This industry as a whole employs millions of people worldwide. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, to me, the differentiating factor is, when I started out in the call center business, I thought about it the same way. Well, I'm doing data entry. This isn't going to be my career. This is just going to help me pay, my rent and stuff for now while I figure out how to do X. And I ended up loving it, to be honest with you.
I had 2 experiences recently. One was, it was actually at Summit where Miss Gonzalez was up and she was speaking, and it was a very beautiful moment. And I just had this like flashback. It was sort of like a Rolodex in my head of all the reduction in forces that I'd been a part of in my career. I mean, part of the industry is we are beholden to every vertical that we're working for and whatever is going on in their industries. I remember once high-fiving someone and using that phrase, churn and burn, like it's not the culture that we have here at Qualfon. Is the kindest, best way I can say it. It is, they think of every agent and every employee, and they keep them in their thoughts and prayers daily.
And to your point, Marisol, right? You go, at some of these other companies, you have these annual summits, and it's very much about, hey, this is the, the great success stories of what we did for our customers, right? And this is the great success stories of what we did for our revenue streams and all those things. And, I think the biggest differentiating factor for me with Qualfon is, if I look at these summits, we spend so much time talking about the individual person and not so much around, we obviously, like any company, we spend time talking about our strategy and our successes and failures, but we also dedicate a huge portion of these summits to really talk about what we're doing for outside of our community, right? What are we doing for things like Cuatro Ciénega, things like Plan 2040. And that's a huge differentiating factor.
I mean, I've worked for companies where, and I don't want to sound like I'm a BPO hater or an industry hater or profit hater. I'm not. Huge fan, huge. But that was the focus, the only focus. And to come to Qualfon, and the story of starting the podcast is I didn't truly believe it until I was at Summit. I was just like, oh, that's just a nice cultural difference about Qualfon, And then at Summit, it's when it really, I was like, oh no, this, they're for real. They really want to, change the world. And then it becomes less about your own personal, or for me at least, my own personal career, but more about like, okay, what can I do to better serve the company?
I started here on January 9th, 2017. And, I kind of felt the same way. When I first kind of started, it was, kind of just jumping in with being kind of thrown to the fire, as they normally say. But, the next week we had our summit in San Antonio, which was my first summit. And that's when I kind of noticed it is very different. The amount of time that we spend talking about, what could we do for our people, and a lot of times we talk about, kind of like the previous companies, right? We talk about attrition, we talk about churn and burn, and we just kind of accept it as, oh, that's normal. The amount of things that we do to kind of say, how do we reduce that number? And not so much part of it obviously is cost, and we're a business, but a big part of it goes back to Alfonso and Mike and the E-team to say, we're really trying to make people's lives better. And the only way we could do that is them being part of the Qualfon family. Outside of, some of our nonprofit stuff and some of our mission work, you can't get that exposure if you don't retain the people.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that kind of blew my mind, which I wasn't aware of till Summit, was, I also, we joked a little bit in the intro about, was this company acquired or not? Because that's another part of this industry is a lot of companies start out with the sole goal of just being acquired by some of the big guys. Qualfon could have been acquired a couple times over and hasn't been because it doesn't align with the vision. It rubbed a huge layer of cynicism off my heart. So I was like, wow. One of the other experiences, with like talent acquisition, and that burn and churn mentality, that again, I'm going to speak for myself, pre-Qualfon was, I admit I was one of those, people hounding talent acquisition about filling seats and that was me. And I remember at Summit, one of our recruiters, we were doing an exercise, like a team building exercise, and one of our recruiters just burst into tears talking about agents in a way that was so loving and emotional and authentic that, again, not an experience I've ever had discussing, talent acquisition. So there's a lot of ways that Qualfon is different.
Mike, you've probably noticed this, but there's been a big focus from the E-team level on this idea of mentorship. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And do you have folks here at Qualfon that you consider your mentors?
Prashant Cherukuri, our CIO, he's been a remarkable mentor for me throughout my career. I think Prashant, one of the things Prashant has tried teaching me, in some cases not very successfully, is one of my biggest drawbacks is patience. I'm not very patient. I typically kind of find how to get from point A to point B fairly quickly. And I think, Prashant's always kind of reminded me that sometimes I do need to slow things down to look at things a little bit more holistically. But also, I think that for me personally, I think the one thing I've looked in my career is I try to view everybody that I interact with as part of my learning experience. So, I look at my kids, I could say that we're inherent because we're parents, we're mentors to them, but ideally they're mentoring us as much as we're doing to them. Because we none of us have a handbook. Well, there's probably 43 billion handbooks on parenting. None of them's ever, they all are right in their own way. But the same thing, I could look at people that have worked for me in my career, and even people that work for me now at Qualfon that I view as mentors because of their dedication, because of all the work that they do, all the various groups that they support, and their approachability. From a mentorship perspective, I think that is the most important lesson for me, is making sure that I am always approachable to anybody on any subject. And whether I have the answer or I don't, if I don't, I'll happily say I don't know. But again, it's being approachable about almost any circumstances is, I think, the biggest value we can learn from anybody in the company.
That's great. What's the most rewarding part of your job? What do you like most about your job here at Qualfon?
I think the thing that I find the most rewarding personally for me is just solving a problem. Okay? So I think, when, whether different functional groups, whether it's Marisol calling me saying, hey, how do I get to this one company total for Hot Topics? That's one thing. Or Brandon on the talent acquisition side, thinking through how do we do something for end-to-end, or, we're going to be doing something for You Matter with Mike, or one of our clients in AHT. I think for me, what I'm most passionate about is really solving the needs of the business. And I think that's what I enjoy the most. The technology for me happens to come secondary, because to me, I feel almost anybody could do technology, but it's really kind of just solving that problem that is the thing that I enjoy the most.
Marisol, that was a great interview. And I don't know Michael as well as you do. Michael has helped me with one QML, so we've talked a little bit, but it was a great suggestion you had to have him as a guest, because I think it gave us a little more, like we said at the beginning, that inside BPO look, which I think is really interesting. It was great. Good call.
Yeah, Michael's great. If I get pulled into a project or he gets pulled into a project, I always enjoy working with him because I know it's going to get done quickly. Because he will find the solution to the problem. I'm excited, Jeremy. We only have a few more episodes left in the season. We have 3 more.
Right. Now, am I putting you on the spot if I say what's in store for season 2?
No, I mean, it's, we're creating it as we go. So if anyone has any suggestions, I highly recommend emailing me or Jeremy, getting in touch with us. We'd love to talk to anyone and everyone. I think you and I both fundamentally believe that everyone has a story to share, and we love hearing them. So I love doing this. It's one of my favorite parts of my job, and I'm excited for it. But no, I don't have any specifics. Do you have any specifics?
No, I don't. And like you, this has become one of the high points of my job. I love doing this. This is one of the things I like doing most, and it's great to work with you and meet all the folks we've been able to meet. And I love the idea of stories and hearing stories from other people. And so I'm just looking forward to the rest of this season, obviously, but season 2.
Yes. Season 2 coming, I believe, February 2021. Can you believe it? 2021.
Crazy.
All right. Well, make sure to share, subscribe, and review. And we do really appreciate it.
We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Marisol.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Qualfon. Remember, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. And we'll see you next time on Mission Qualfon.